see him on the membership page, the Chiropractic Trust page. He's always out there giving great advice. He's always ready to help folks. He's got this intoxicating energy about him. And I think we've met about 4 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, first online, and then through, the phone, corresponding with each other, and just always been a great cat, super great energy, and he brings so much to the table. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Damien Ciasullo.
Thank you, sir. Just remember, I got something from the top. Old school. So my name is Damien Ciasullo. I've been practicing in Philadelphia for 16 years. I was just telling the young gentleman here that that's home for me. That's the only place I ever wanted to go when I was done practicing. And I'll talk a little bit about my story yet in a couple minutes. Ed left the room, but I want to say thank you to him. I was so grateful. It was funny, Mark touched on a lot of topics of abundance and money and all this geeky stuff that doesn't make us feel good. And I remember years and years ago when I was in a pretty tough spot and just kind of floundering around in practice. I remember meeting Ed at a seminar, and I had met him before, and there's a couple stories I can tell about Ed, but the one that pertains to where we are today is I just had a question about poverty mindset. Like, I had been years out of practice, probably like 5-6 years out of practice at least, maybe even a little more. And I was just mired still in that same old poverty mindset, that student, stuff that I think all of us cross over one time. And so I just was sitting out to dinner, and I sat down with Ed, and I was like, man, I don't deserve to be rubbing elbows with this guy. Like, this guy's, everybody knows him, and he has a great practice, and here I am, his peon. And so I said, well, I'm going to get my chance to ask a pro some questions. And I started asking about money and abundance and that idea. And he said, very frankly, like, oh man, that was something that I went through too. And I think we all go through it. And in his Ed way, just gave like some pearls of wisdom real quick and right off the cuff and said, why don't you read these couple books? And I did. I did my homework. And I have to say, I think that moment was actually a good catalyst for some really great changes that I've made over time. And maybe I'll touch on a couple of those today. By the way, there's about a 97% chance that I'm going to fall backwards on the steps. Feel free to laugh when it happens. We're going to talk about some five do's and don'ts in building a dream practice, and what is a dream practice, and what does that look like? What's a good practice? What's a not so good practice? I've had both in my short career. I had a crummy practice where it was horrible, and I was thinking about being a biology teacher, and I did the wrong thing. And I had a middle of the road practice that's okay. And I have today, which is a really cool practice. I was saying that the class I spoke yesterday, I think I'm probably the busiest solo practitioner chiropractic office in Philly, which is not saying that to brag. It's just saying, like, man, that's pretty cool. I feel good about that. Going from someday I will unveil my initial appointment books for my first couple of years of practice and just open them up, and like it would make anybody feel either good or just viscerally upset, depending on your perspective. So we're going to talk about some cool stuff, but before we do that, let's do a quick story. Let's see if I can make this work. I should have been kicked out of Generation X a long time ago. So we're going to talk a little bit about, are you going to do the same thing as everybody else, or are you going to stand out in your community? This type of practice is different. This is not, I know for a fact, it's not what most people do. It's not accepted in most circles. People will even tell you, we'll touch on it later, it's illegal, right? Which is nice, that's a little bit of intrigue. So how are you going to stand out in your community? Everyone wants to be different. Everyone wants to be unique. Everyone wants to put their stamp on things. So let's talk about that and let's learn from each other. But first, a story. So I know nothing about South Carolina. This is my first time here. It's my first time at Sherman. And so I said, man, I want to say something about South Carolina. I don't know anything about South Carolina. So I was just doing my thing, going through life, and hoping a story hit me over the head. And boom, the story hit me over the head. I was listening to a financial podcast, oddly enough, and this guy told this story that I'm going to tell you about Roy Sullivan. Does anybody know who Roy Sullivan is? This is very loosely connected to South Carolina. He's not from South Carolina. He was a park ranger in Virginia, Shenandoah National Park. But he has a record. So here he is holding his park ranger uniform with a hole in the hat. He has a record for being struck by lightning the most times of any human being ever. And this uniform is on display in the state of California. That's the only South Carolina connection I can make. Here we go. So let's talk about Roy Sullivan for a moment. We're going to guess in a second how many times Roy was struck by lightning, but Roy Sullivan was known as the Spark Ranger because of the amount of times he was struck by lightning. The Shenandoah National Park Ranger was apparently a natural conductor of electricity. He was struck by lightning in a staggering number of times, though some doubt Sullivan's stories. No one ever witnessed any of the strikes, only the aftermath, but the Guinness Book of World Records verified him and gave him the award of the most lightning strikes survived. So here are his stories. Number 1, strike 1, April 1942. Sullivan had only been with the Park Service for about 6 years. He was stationed at the brand new Miller's Head Fire Tower when a storm blew in. The tower was so new, lightning rods hadn't been installed yet, and it ended up being struck 7 or 8 times. Sullivan decided to get the heck out of there, but only made it a few feet before the lightning found him. It burned a half-inch strip all the way down his right leg and blasted off his big toe. Oh. He had blood pouring out of his foot and through the hole in the sole of his shoe. Strike 2. Nearly 3 decades later, in 1969, Sullivan was driving a park truck down a road, and he had both windows open, and the lightning struck a tree nearby the truck and literally went through his car, into him, through the other end of the car, and hit a tree on the other side of the park. As a result, he lost consciousness and nearly drove his truck off the edge of a cliff. When he came to, Sullivan was missing his eyebrows and eyelashes. Strike 3. The third strike a year later happened when Sullivan was off duty. He was tending to his garden at home when lightning hit a nearby transformer and jumped his shoulder, knocking him down and burning him lightly. Strike 4. Number 4 set poor Sullivan on fire. There was a gentle rain, but no thunder, until just one big clap, the loudest thing I ever heard, he said. When my ears stopped ringing, I heard something sizzling. It was my hair on fire. The flames were up 6 inches. Luckily, he had been registering people at a camping station, so he was able to use wet paper towels from a nearby bathroom to smother the flames. Strike 5. August 1973 brought the 5th strike. Again, Sullivan was in a park truck and saw the storms coming. All too aware of his track record, the ranger tried to outrun the lightning. Once he felt he was out of harm's way, Sullivan stopped to have a look. Big mistake. Quote, I actually saw the lightning shoot out of the cloud this time and it was coming straight for me, he said. It even knocked off one of my shoes while the lace was still tied. Strike 6. Sullivan was walking along a park trail in 1976 when he was struck a 6th time. It was the final straw for the Spark Ranger. He retired 5 months later. Strike 7. Unfortunately, the lightning found him anyway. On June 25th, 1977, Sullivan was trout fishing when the hair on his arm bristled. This strike to the head burned his chest and stomach and caused hearing loss in one ear. To top off Lucky 7, Sullivan, running back to his car after being struck by lightning, came across a black bear which attacked him. In case you're wondering what the odds are getting struck by lightning, it's 280 million to 1. The odds of getting struck by lightning 7 times are 4.15 in 30 zeros. So I think they call it, I looked it up, it's a decillion or something. I've never heard of it. And the sad news for old Sullivan, if that wasn't sad enough, he couldn't take it anymore, and he died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Oh, sad story, right? Or interesting story. I don't know how to take that, other than maybe in our lives, maybe the idea is to do something different when you see something different happening to you and address things in a different way. And if things aren't going your way, being smart enough to make a decision to change your direction. Or just find a place on Earth where the least number of lightning storms are and go live there. So here's my story. That's me. That's the most southern picture I have for a Philadelphia kid. That's me in a coonskin cap.